It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Not a moment too soon. Welcome, everybody, to another installment of JC and Morgan, number 210. And it just happens to fall on our 7-year anniversary. And if you're kind of doing the math, well, how does 210, 52 weeks in a year? Sometimes we do 2 in a given week. Well, when we first started this thing 7 years ago, a lot of things were different. Okay, we were doing it on Skype. We didn't have professional sounding microphones. We did it during the season, but we didn't capitalize on the off season, which, as we know, college football is truly a year-round sport. We had all kinds of hiccups. We couldn't have guests. It was ragtag. It was Wayne's World, cable access TV type stuff. But you know what? That's what makes this story so rewarding today. And the only reason I even know all this, JC, is because you had a post on Facebook years ago, and it popped up in my memories segment. For those that have Facebook, you know what that is. It'll just pop up memory photographs, like this is what you posted 7 years ago, or this is what you did 7 years ago, what have you. And it was JC posting, glad to be a part of the first JC and Morgan. And you put a picture of all things, the LSU head football coach at the time. Anybody want to guess who that is? Anybody? Give in 3, 2, 1. Les Miles. That's right. It was Les Miles 7 years ago, 3 coaches ago. Oh, how things have changed in Baton Rouge. But anyway, we say this. I don't think it's too much. It might be not even enough, but we thank you. We've watched this thing grow by leaps and bounds. Some of you have been there from the very start. Most of you have not. Maybe that's a good thing. It's definitely improved over the years, we think. And we're just happy that it's emerged. I listen to other college football podcasts. There's some good, there's some bad out there. But I feel real good about what we've been able to do in that amount of time. So with that being said, I am Mike here in Studio B. I'm actually in Kentucky today. JC is in Studio A. He is in Chicago as we continue to play geographical musical chairs. And we're ready to get this thing cranked up, JC. We got a lot of stuff to get to, so I don't want to waste too much time. How are you, sir?
Got a long way to go. Short time to get there. We're
That's
going to
right.
do what they say can't be done. But yeah, I call it Studio North. And then I have Studio
North.
South.
I like that.
I'll be in Columbia, South Carolina, actually, the next 3 JC and Morgans, depending on the day. But no, I think any day we do it the next 3 weeks. But certainly I flew back into Chicago from Atlanta earlier this week after being in Charlotte, and then hitting luxurious Helen, Georgia for Labor Day and tubing down the Chattahoochee.
Love it.
With the fiance. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, ready to get this thing cranked up. Lots to get to. A lot of interesting football this past weekend, and I think this coming weekend we could see even more interesting results.
Yeah, no question. And normally we do these on Tuesdays with the holiday and some of our logistics. We couldn't do it this Tuesday. So we are going to review as we always do, but we're also going to look ahead as we're closer and closer to week 2 in college football. It's just kind of some overarching thoughts on week 1. First off, we have to just quickly mention, and the timing of this isn't great. These are the kind of stories you wish would happen in like July when you don't have games to talk about. But we do have to mention the ACC did, in fact, officially add Stanford, Cal, and SMU. That is a real thing that will start next year. It is going to be an 18-team conference. There's not much to be said here that hasn't already been said, JC. I would just say this. There are a lot of people ripping this move for the ACC, including, for example, Paul Feinbaum, who basically was saying, well, you've just devalued your conference. This is terrible. This is the worst thing in the world. Look, I'm not sitting here and telling you that this makes the ACC a stronger league. I don't think that's what it was ever about. The ACC clearly has to now do some things that they're maybe not overly excited about. And if you were to give truth serum to Jim Phillips, was he really jumping for joy when he added 2 teams in California and one that's been relatively irrelevant for decades in Dallas? No, but at some point you have to do some things in order perhaps to even survive. You know that Florida State and Clemson want out. You know that North Carolina may want out. Somebody was trying to Paul was trying to make the point that you just now signed a death warrant. FSU and Clemson are definitely going to try and leave. Well, you can't just try and appease them to keep them in. You want to know who tried to appease a particular school and it didn't work out? Ask the Big 12 what it was like trying to kiss the feet of the University of Texas for all those years and how that worked. They bailed. Ask the Pac-12 what it was like to continually try to appease Southern Cal to make sure they're happy. Guess what? They bolted for the Big Ten. It's an impossible mission, what you're asking Jim Phillips to do. I'm going to defend Jim Phillips on this one. He didn't create this, but this is what he's got. And so sometimes you have to do things that are outside the box. That's what they've done. What does it all mean in the end? I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think it devalues anything. I mean, the ACC is still going to be like most conferences. It's going to be judged on the strength of the the top tier, the upper tier of its league. We don't judge leagues based on the bottom. If we did, the SEC would be talking about Vanderbilt, and the ACC would be talking about, well, in some years, Duke. Obviously not this year. You judge it based on the top. So Florida State and Clemson are still at the top for now. They also still want out. And for those that think that they're going to get out, again, I would point out, no one has broken a Power 5 GOR, grant of rights. Several have tried, several have wanted to, and it just hasn't happened. So take that for what it's worth. That's the only. I don't want to spend too much time on it, JC, but I just figured it was worth mentioning because it did happen over the last week.
Yeah, I mean, am I a fan of the move? Do I think it's another kind of desperate move to keep that league together? Yes, but what do you want them to do? I mean, there's nobody they could have added Eastern wise that would have brought any value at all. You could kind of be sort of what I think the Pac-12 will end up doing long term and become like a farm system and try to grow programs. So you can add a USF or a East Carolina or West Virginia is not going anywhere after you've treated them like poo through the years. Cincinnati's in the Big 12, so who do you go get? And honestly, Mike, what this does, it does 2 things to keep them intact. Number one, it brings more money in because with all the talk about streaming, and I know we're going to talk a lot more about that because of the ESPN Spectrum deal and all that, you're still bringing in the San Francisco Bay television market for all your sports.
Right.
And you're also bringing in Dallas-Fort Worth. That is a large television market. You are adding those to Atlanta and DC and all the Florida markets and every other market you got. Greenville, Spartanburg, Raleigh, Durham, wherever, you name it. So Boston, New York, I forgot to Pittsburgh. I forgot to go up the Atlantic coast. And so that brings more money in because that's still more television dollars. And it also prevents the, what do they call them, the Magnificent Seven or whatever, which I'm not convinced most of those schools had anywhere to go. I think they were Richard Gere from An Officer and a Gentleman. I have nowhere else to go.
I want your DOR.
I have nowhere else to go. I have nowhere else to go. But it keeps them from dissolving the league because now Stanford, Cal, SMU, they're not voting to dissolve the league. So basically, you had 3 schools against it, and I think it's very telling and interesting. Mike, I was sitting in Charlotte around a bunch of Tar Heel fans and then Gamecock fans last weekend, and to see the fact that the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the night before this became official, releases a long statement from their board talking about how they were completely against this move. And for them to make that school that has run that league for years People, Clemson and Florida State are the big dogs football wise in that league. Make no mistake about it. Chapel Hill is the big dog in that league. They've run that show for a year. They are the Tony Soprano of that league. They are the Don Vito Corleone of that league. There's no question about it. And for them to come out and make that statement, and then for it to happen anyway, that's very telling of the state that things are in right now.
I'll stay with your Mafia theme. Somebody had to flip, and it wasn't going to be North Carolina, and it wasn't going to be Florida State, and it wasn't going to be Clemson. NC State flipped.
It was Fredo.
NC State was Fredo. I know it was you, Fredo. I know it was you. I love you, but you're going to have to get whacked on a boat in Lake Tahoe. Somebody had to flip. They got that one. As I've always said on this, the moment you hear there's going to be a president's vote is the moment you know it's going to happen, because they don't do votes without knowing the votes are already in. It's the same thing when in Congress. If you follow politics at all, they know how those votes are going to go before they actually go. Everybody says, I'm a yay or a nay before it actually becomes official. So they knew they had the votes. They got someone to flip, and the rest is history. And as you pointed out, I won't get too knee-deep in the weeds on this, but yes, every school is going to make more money now. So there's more financial there is a financial benefit component to this. And also it changes the voting structure. You've got 3 more votes out there to maybe diffuse a little bit of that power that Chapel Hill has enjoyed over that league for a long, long time. So, just that is really, I don't want to say the final domino, because the Pac-2 is still out there, and who knows what Oregon State and Washington State do. I always thought they'd be the ones that didn't have a chair when the music stopped, that they'd be left in the cold, and they have, and it's unfortunate. They don't deserve that. Their fans don't deserve that. We have a big Oregon State fan, Tony in Atlanta, who listens, and he is just like beside himself over this. Those are not 2 apathetic schools. Those are 2 schools that love college football, and their fan bases love college football. And they're sitting there just scrambling right now in the 11th hour. But that is that story. We can put the major part of all of this realignment to bed for now, and just focus on games, which is what we're going to do. The JC5 is coming up. The JC5 presented by Elite Roofing and Restoration. Jeremy Johnson and his crew have been helping people with new roofs, roof estimates, whether it's hail damage, wind damage, or just a roof that, it's too old. And you know that eventually roofs have to be replaced on your house. Nobody wants to do it, but very often it is covered by insurance. So give them a call. Again, they cover Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida, parts of Tennessee. No one I would trust more to do it. 678-781-1998. Again, that phone number for Elite Roofing and Restoration, 678-781-1998. All right, morale of a great nation, as always, relies heavily on the upcoming JC5, constructed by the one and only J.C. Shurburtt.
Absolutely, Mike. It was a pleasure putting together today's JC5 about 15 minutes before we went on the air. All right, so the first thing, but I've had this rattling around the old noggin for a while, right?
That's right.
Length of games. And Lane Kiffin, who I tend to agree with on Twitter quite a bit these days, I think Lane's a Gen Xer like we are. The common sense, he work hard, play hard guy, just like most Gen Xers. But the common sense now is exuding from that generation. He had a great tweet today about girls that love football, and I tagged my fiance in it. So, honey, there you go. Look on Twitter. Okay, so the games, the shortening of the games. First of all, I guess there were 55 minutes worth of commercials in Florida State, LSU the other night. Chip Kelly made the point about the game going too fast. Said, hope y'all are selling a lot of commercials. That's kind of a Steve Spurrier thing. Hope y'all are selling a lot of commercials. And then, Lane made the point, this was not a problem, except for trying to make it fit into a television window. And I actually think ESPN does a great job when a game runs over of putting it on ESPN News, or making sure it's on the app, or making sure that it's available on one of their many channels. I never thought this was like something critical for the game, and they did it under the guise of player safety, which is a pile of bunk.
Mm-hmm.
And they've already tried. They tried to do this once in '02, and Mark Richt spoke out about it and said, "Why are you taking away, things the fans love?" And I think I realized after sitting at a game live this past weekend and watching games on TV, the breaks are what makes the game long. It's not the plays. So, and I think people that's starting to get exposed. I understand all that TV money we just talked about. You have to sell inventory, and you have to have more inventory. The more inventory, the better. I totally get that, but I don't know that the answer was taking away gameplay. It's something I've kind of struggled with because I didn't know that it would be noticeable, but it is noticeable for coaches, players, fans, observers, all that. So I think they probably need to go back to the drawing board and find a happy medium here by next season, because it's just going to, this is realignment and things like that. The TV dollars have turned people off as it is. I think taking away football, it will accelerate people being turned off. Not saying people won't show up, not saying the sport's going to lose popularity. I'm just saying, TV folks, you're kind of entering the danger zone a little bit. What say you?
Agreed. I wanted to take a wait and see on this, right? I didn't want to just immediately say, well, that sucks. It's a terrible decision. They were downplaying the impact of it before it even started, right? Well, it's only going to mean a couple plays for each team. You're still going to stop the clock on first downs within 2 minutes in each half. You're still going to stop the clock on every incomplete pass. You're right to say commercials aren't going anywhere. That's an argument and a battle that if you're a fan, you're not going to win, because when you those rights fees contracts the checks have already been cashed. They have to make that money somewhere. They're going to make it on advertising. We're in a profession that people like you and me certainly don't want to discourage the value of proud sponsors. I've always said you don't need 20 minutes at the half in a college football game. The NFL does it with 12. You mean to tell me you couldn't do it in 15? You want to shave 5 minutes a game off? Give me a 15-minute halftime. If that's not enough time for the band to get down there and recite a few tunes, tell the trombone player to go on a crash diet and get down there quicker. You're just going to have to make it work. I don't think we need 20-minute halftime. I mean, if you're at the stadium, do you want 20 minutes between the end of the second quarter and the start of the third? We've just kind of gotten accustomed to it, but I don't know if anybody truly likes it. I don't think it's necessary. Here's where I really noticed where the rule can suck, because a lot of games you don't care. I mean, if it's a blowout, you don't miss those plays. And a lot of college football games, unlike the NFL, are blowouts. There's a lot of mismatches each and every week in college football. There just are. Where you notice it. So I watched every play of 3 games in particular. Thursday night, Utah, Florida. Saturday night, Battle of the Carolinas. Sunday night, LSU, Florida State. When a team is behind and needs to score points in a hurry and play catch up, and the team, what do? They go hurry up, they go tempo, they throw the ball first down. And as a fan, we are so used to, all right, clock stops. That's like a timeout, except it's not anymore. And so I don't like that at all. I mean, that is we don't have the 2-minute warning, remember now, like we do in the NFL. So we have nothing to stop the clock other than an incomplete pass or out of bounds. And again, I'm not talking the final 2 minutes, but a lot of these where you're down multiple scores, you don't wait till 2 minutes to hurry up. You might do it at 7.5 minutes, 5 minutes, 3.5 minutes. And so that's when you really notice it. And I noticed it like watching the Gamecocks trying to rally against the Tar Heels. And it's like, okay, it's a first. Oh, no, it's not. When LSU, which we'll get to that game later. We'll get to all these games later, at least the key ones. When they're trying to mount a comeback, again, first down, no, does clock still ticking. So I don't think it was necessary. I wanted to see how it played out, and I watched it, and I noticed it like you did, JC. Not a fan. Just not a fan. And I don't think coaches are going to be fans either, because every coach has been in that situation where you're down in the fourth quarter and you need multiple scores, and that's part of the strategy. It's part of the strategy. So it's not just about making the game shorter. You are literally changing the complexion, the anatomy of a comeback in the sport. That to me is pretty dramatic, and I don't think it's necessary. And to your other point, yes, absolutely. I don't know any college football fan that's at a game or watching it on TV that says, "Oh man, if only this game was 4.5 minutes shorter." I don't know. I don't know these people, so that was not a problem for fans. It was not a safety issue. That's comical. We know what this was about, and I think it's an overreach to say the least.
All right, the Pac-12, the last hurrah for this league looks to be pretty solid, man. You had a lot of big scores, a lot of big wins. Colorado beating TCU was just the tip of the iceberg. Washington took Boise State to the woodshed. Wazoo won by 26 in the Fort Collins. Not an easy place to play.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA, closer game than maybe I expected against Coastal, and the score was lower than I thought it would be. And then Oregon State against a pretty good San Jose State team on Sunday. Blows out the Spartans in San Jose behind DJ Ungalai. Pac-12 was third. Was it the record's 13-0 now?
13-0 if you include the extra game. Yeah.
Haven't lost a game. So, your thoughts. I know you're a quarterback guy, so I'll let you run with it. That this league does have a lot of great quarterbacks this year.
It's the best quarterback league, top to bottom. It really is, and that's what that's showing out. That stat, that 13-0, because not all of those games were just cupcakes. In fact, I'm not sure if there was an FCS one in the bunch. I'm sure there was at least one, but not many. A lot of those games, if you looked at the Vegas lines, were expected to be fairly close, and the Pac won all of them. And of course, Utah beat down Florida in a game against an SEC opponent on Thursday night. So yeah, no, it's one of those. If you're a Pac fan, you're just sitting there and you get that picture of Larry Scott on one dartboard, and then on your other dartboard, you put one of Klyavkov, and you just sit there and throw it at it all day long as you cry in your beer and watch the dismantling of a league that lasted around a century, that would have had a high mark this season, and now it's about to crumble away. But yeah, if you got great quarterback play, you can overcome a lot of these are not great teams that we're talking about for the most part. The jury is still out on the Trojans, but all the other ones, they're not great teams, but many of them have great quarterbacks. And in the case of like the guy you mentioned, DJ Uiagalelei, that's a situation. Change of scenery meant everything, and he's playing with more confidence now. He made a number of plays. We've talked about the coaching staff at Oregon State. They certainly deserve better. That is a program that has had a history of having good coaches roll through there. Like Corvallis actually has attracted some pretty impressive coaches over the years. Coach Erickson would be one of the top names, but Jonathan Smith is a guy that people are going to become more and more familiar with, and I don't know how long he lasts in Corvallis, given the future of that program. But he did a terrific job last year and did a terrific job. I think he'll do a terrific job this year with DJ in developing. So yeah, it's a terrific story, but it's also, if you are a fan of any of those programs or that league, it's bittersweet.
Jonathan Smith to Oregon State is like Josh Heupel to Oklahoma. I think he was a JUCO transfer, maybe not, maybe a 4-year guy. But the Erickson team at OSU that went 11-1 and won the Fiesta Bowl, slaughtered Notre Dame. Really good football team. I think Chad Ochocinco was on that team too. It was Chad Johnson back then.
Right.
He was the quarterback So he's a Beaver for life in a lot of ways. Coached under Chris Peterson at Washington. So it will be hard to pry him out of there, but a lot depends on kind of where they're at.
He's making $2.4 million, which is chump change in today's day and age. And I know Oregon State just poured a bunch of money into their stadium. Like, I don't know what the collective looks like over there, but if you don't G him up, he gone. Like, you're only so loyal to your alma mater, even if you played there and you get the warm and fuzzies when thinking of yesteryear. He's going to have to get paid, and he's going to be highly coveted.
Him, Mike Elko from Duke. I think we've seen enough from him to realize he's elite.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I know they're going to the Big Ten, so they're going to be in pretty good shape money-wise. But Kalen DeBoer from Washington, man, that guy. Yeah, I didn't think they could upgrade from Chris Peterson. And then, of course, they had Jimmy Lake, who was a disaster. But Kalen DeBoer's been really good since he was the OC at Indiana. Then he got Fresno State.
Right.
Watch out, like if Michigan comes open, because he's got some ties to the Midwest. Watch out for that there. Notre Dame is awfully good. I know they play Tennessee State. But, man, you watch them play. It reminds me of some of those early Saban Alabama teams in some ways. Probably not as athletic on defense and in the secondary as those groups. But they are big, strong, powerful, fast. And Sam Hartman, yet again, 14 for 17, 194 yards, only played half the game, 2 touchdowns. I'm telling you, if they take NC State to the woodshed this weekend, which I anticipate they will, Ohio State and then Central Michigan the following week, I'm not basing this on Ohio State struggling at Indiana because Lord knows, Bloomington. I'm not even going to say that. That's ridiculous. Bloomington's a tough place to go play. But Ohio State better watch out here in a couple of weeks because this team that Notre Dame has this year, it just feels different and looks different. Your thoughts?
Massive on the line of scrimmage, might have the best offensive lineman in college football in the alt kid. They always have tight ends that are matchup problems, and they're good enough on defense. I don't know if I'd say they're a dominant type of, what we're used to seeing with a lot of SEC powers defense, but good enough. I think NC State might make a game of that. I could be wrong, but certainly I was plenty wrong on my picks last week. But I actually think that can be a competitive. That could be like a little bit of a trap game. You're right. Everybody's looking forward to the Ohio State game. We've talked about it. Who are the potential, to use a Tim Brandoism, fly in the ointment type of programs that could spoil the college football playoff party. If Notre Dame with that schedule goes 11-1, they're in. It's like you can book it. They're not going to play in a conference championship game, but that schedule has enough high caliber games on it where 11-1, I'm convinced Notre Dame is a shoo-in at that point. So even if you lost, let's say they lost to Ohio State in a close competitive game, they could still find themselves in a playoff. But that's not the only challenging game on the schedule, as we know. I'm not quite the believer yet, JC. I'm not quite there yet. There's no question getting a Sam Hartman. This is, again, Dabo, you're going to have to realize we are in the portal era. You can't win championships without going to the portal. If Nick Saban does it, if Jim Harbaugh does it, if Lincoln Riley does it, if
Kirby did it this past, he didn't do it 2 years ago, but he did it this past year. Yeah,
he did it. Yep, he sure is. There's you can't get to that next level because you are running a race and you're giving your other championship caliber type programs a 5-yard head start with the portal if you're not getting into it. So Notre Dame without Sam Hartman, I don't think this is much of a conversation. I think it's the same old Notre Dame. But with Sam Hartman, that is a difference maker to what is already the building blocks that they always have in place. Line of scrimmage, they're going to be fine. They usually have a really good skill player somewhere not as many as some of the others. Team speed is not always Notre Dame's strength at that level, but yeah, Sam Hartman could certainly be the difference maker. I'm a believer in Notre Dame. I'm just not all the way there. Let's see what they do Saturday against the Wolfpack.
And I don't blame you, Mike, because and this leads me to my next point, but I'm going to point this out. Okay, so they played week 0. They do not have an open date until October 21st. All right, so here's how this bad boy shakes out for them all of a sudden. You go to Raleigh this weekend. I'm with you, not an easy place to play. The Pack was a little underwhelming at UConn, but they won. And I'm going to say this, Jim Mora has UConn playing much better than the dumpster fire that they've got. Jim Mora's a good coach. You got the Chippewas of Central Michigan coming in, then the big game against the Buckeyes on September 23rd. Well, wait a minute. The next week, they go to Wallace Wade, Durham, North Carolina, to play the Dukies. All right. But wait, because this game got overlooked a little bit. Louisville, Georgia Tech got overlooked a little bit. Georgia Tech was playing their butts off in Atlanta, playing inspired football, and then Jeff Brom just starts dicing them to pieces like a sushi, like a hibachi chef, man. Jeff Brom's awfully good, and I think Louisville's a much improved football team this year.
Yeah.
So they turn around and go to Louisville the following week, and then who comes to town the next week? The Trojans.
Yeah.
So you don't get Notre Dame does not get an off week until the next week, and then they play Pitt, at Clemson, Wake Forest, and at Stanford. So can they stay healthy? Can they sustain this? Can they? I mean, because all of a sudden you look and you're like, after Central Michigan, there are just landmines the next 3 weeks at Duke, at Louisville, and Southern Cal coming in. That's it. So that works both ways. It works great for Notre Dame if you win because you're a shoe-in for the playoff, even with a loss. They say they drop one to Clemson later. But there are a lot of potential losses there all of a sudden that maybe we didn't think. And on that note, I think the ACC, Mike, based on – and I'm not trying to overreact from 1 week, but I'll be honest. You saw North Carolina's spring game. You knew they were preaching toughness. I thought they did play very tough against the Gamecocks on Saturday night. I thought they were a much more physical football team than South Carolina, but I also think compared to last year's North Carolina team, they're much more physical. We saw what Duke did to Clemson. I mentioned Louisville. Florida State obviously looked like the class of the league. And then I don't think Clemson's going to go away and, bury their head in the sand or whatever. I think they'll still be a contender. I think top to bottom this season, the Atlantic Coast Conference is one of those years kind of like 2016 where a lot of good quarterbacks in the league. A lot of my point is, see if you agree. I think the ACC will be much more competitive than maybe we thought heading in. Where we're like, well, maybe Florida State will challenge Clemson, but it's a Clemson FSU world. I think there are a lot of good teams in that league this year.
Agreed. The Florida State dismantling of LSU. Now LSU did everything they could to lose that game. Just terrible red zone offense, terrible goal line offense. And Chip Kelly, who I defend on this show quite a bit, I still think Chip Kelly Chip Kelly.
Brian.
Brian Kelly.
I get confused too.
Chip Kelly's good too. He's doing his thing at UCLA. But Brian Kelly, I think Brian Kelly is a good coach. I think he's the right guy for the job. And I don't think, it was like his strategy that killed LSU. Although I will say sometimes hubris is a bad thing that can work against you. When you can't get it on 1st and goal and 2nd and goal and 3rd and goal, and it's the first quarter of a game, take the points. That was mistake number 1, but they had multiple mistakes. They were leading that game at the half, and then they just got walloped by FSU. And I saw FSU up and close last year in the bowl game. The fact that they got Jared Verse back, I don't know how they pulled that off, but that's a first rounder last year. Now he's just turning himself into a top 10 pick. He's one of the most unblockable players in college football. They have a quarterback, and then they go into the portal. There it is again. And they get Keon Coleman from Michigan State, who is just almost unguardable. Okay. And they had no answer. And they've got athletes on the perimeter at LSU on defense. They couldn't cover him. Could not cover him at all. So all the talk is about another receiver they have at 6'7". That's your biggest weapon right there is Coleman. And he's going to shred defenses throughout the season. And then Florida State has a defense. This has all been building under Coach Norvell. And Florida State did a wise thing. They didn't hit the panic button. They stayed with it. And now Florida State, the term I like to use, JC, they're a volcano program. They are going to erupt eventually. You're going to keep them down for a while with some bad hires and maybe some bad breaks, but they're never going to stay down forever. At some point, Florida State was going to get back to playing competitive or championship level type football. And I don't think it's an overstatement to say they're back. They're back. There's no reason why they can't win that league. They got a big one against Clemson. We'll see how they do in that. But they are back. This question that you posed would have been a lot stronger had Clemson not spit the bit against Duke. But that's more of a credit to Duke. I mean, Mike Elko won 9 games last year. I told everybody about Riley Leonard. Like, that dude's going to be an NFL quarterback sometime, somewhere you watch. He's an incredible athlete. And so the bottom of the ACC, Georgia Tech was competitive, as you pointed out. Louisville, Brahmas, that's like the perfect fit. I mean, that to be able to, for that all to work out the way it did, he'll get Louisville back to relevance. So, yeah, I think it's a stronger league than people probably thought going in. And the FSU win over LSU, which was, again, the primetime game, the only game going on, that clearly was one where that's a statement game, not just for one team, but for the conference as well. And obviously the Tar Heels over the Gamecocks. I did not know. I told you what the coaching staff told me last spring. We have to stop being soft. That was their message. Soft, 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 soft. We're tired of hearing we're soft. We're tired of playing soft. We were soft in the red zone on offense, and we've been soft on defense, and nobody respects us, and justifiably so. You combine that with a bunch of 4-star kids that finally started playing like 4-star kids on Saturday night, and you combine that with Gene Chizik, who this just knows a thing or two about coaching championship defense, and all of a sudden they've got a front seven that looks formidable, and they dominated that game for anybody who watched it. So yeah, and they have a top 5 NFL draft pick quarterback. That's a pretty good recipe to win a lot of games in Chapel Hill. So all of a sudden now, if they didn't have a lot of respect going in, I think they came out of that with a lot more.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. And because Notre Dame, we mentioned Notre Dame earlier, plays 5 ACC games a year. It does affect them as well. So, by the way, Mark from Vegas on the chat line here says TJ
Houshmandzadeh. Yeah, he was on that team as well.
That's right. Help me there, Mike. Man, you're the NFL broadcaster, not me, man. Yeah. TJ Houshmandzadeh was also on that team. Stud. So, wow, that was crazy. And just to wrap it up here, SMU, Cal, Stanford, how they fit into that league. How does it help them, hurt them? I don't know about Stanford necessarily. I think all three, it's going to be, at least for a few years, be intriguing in basketball season because you've got so many traditional powers in the ACC, Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse, Louisville, all rotating in. So of the three, who does it help the most? I think by far it helps SMU the most, followed by Cal, and then Stanford, who's just kind of trying to find a home and find their way back to relevance in a lot of sports. But I think it could be a saving grace for SMU and Cal, just, kind of getting in for SMU, a higher level situation. And for Cal, maybe going out and playing some new teams and getting a breath of fresh air after struggling in the pack for a while.
Yeah, look, I don't think anything bad comes out of this other than the student athletes that have to travel for the other sports that are not on a charter flight, which, again, if you've ever been on a charter flight, chartering across the country is really not that bad a deal. In fact, some people would say it's pretty cool. You just sit back in your plane and you got food waiting on you. You're not going through TSA security. Or TSA security in Atlanta's airport with some of the most miserable, unhappy, and bitter people on the planet. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just have people waiting on you hand and foot. These college kids actually do okay when it comes to travel if you're football and basketball. The other sports, not so much. We're going to do our boss segment later on. top performers over week one. I'm going to add this right now since you brought it up. Here's who's the boss: SMU wealthy alums, because they wanted this to happen so badly. The only way it was going to happen is if they said, we got this. You don't need to give us a dime. We'll foot the bill for like 10 years. And that's what they did. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. They're not getting the TV money. So all these other schools are making more money than they did before. And SMU says, no, but you keep your $35 million, whatever the number is. I'm losing count because it changes every time you add and subtract teams. You keep it. We got it. We're SMU. We'll find the money between the seat cushions. That is a major flex. That is a major boss move. And it's the only way that a program that, again, has been largely irrelevant since the Pony Express, that they get into a Power 5 league that doesn't make sense geographically, historically, successfully, really any other way. So I admire that move. Good for SMU. Beautiful campus. Been there. Beautiful campus. Good education. And a lot of wealthy alums. And sometimes, today's day and age of where it's all about the dollars, if it's going to make sense in college football, SMU's alums said, no. We're doing it, baby. Here's the check. Don't you keep that $35 million. We got this covered. Love it.
There's money. There's all money. Just like
that's right. And they got plenty. They got plenty of that over there. All right, good stuff. Off to a good start. JC5. Again, lots more coming, including the boss segment. We'll talk about upcoming games. We will get into the Deion thing, I promise. I know you just haven't had enough coverage of Colorado and Deion these last few days. I don't think the media has given it enough run, but we will touch on that as well. It's JC and Morgan, presented by Chicken Cock Bourbon. Chicken Cock originated in Paris, Kentucky. Now, it's about 45 minutes from where I'm from. Paris, Kentucky is not far, or where I'm at right now, I should say, not where I'm from. Not far from Lexington. You can find Chicken Cock near you on the Chief Sports app, which we're proud to be a part of, in the Chicken Cock Challenge section on the home screen. One of the fastest growing bourbons in the U.S. Smooth, little to no aftertaste or bite. Serving JC and Morgan. Get your Chicken Cock today. Serve your game day with Chicken Cock, proudly made in Kentucky and South Carolina owned. More JC and Morgan coming up after a quick timeout.
Down here in the South, we don't always see eye to eye. While our taste in college football teams, or what sauce, if any, goes best on a rack of ribs, or what to mix with our Dixie vodka might be up for debate, we can all agree there's nothing better than a Southern tailgate. And like our favorite college teams, our ingredients come from small towns and big cities. They're grown in Southern soil, are crafted by Southern hands, and proudly represent the South in our backyard and beyond. So raise a glass of Dixie Southern Vodka to celebrate being made in America and raised in the South.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
Mike here for Elite Roofing and Restoration. Chances are you're a homeowner, you're going to have that roof replaced at some point. Could be because of wind or hail damage. Could be because it's just that time. The roof is old and you don't want to take any more chances. Go ahead and call Elite Roofing and Restoration. They will take terrific care of you, as they have for me over the years. They provide exceptional roofing services. They offer a highly knowledgeable staff on insurance claims for roof repairs and replacements, as well as an extensive catalog of materials and colors to ensure your roof looks as good as it performs. So how do you do it? Well, you just start off, you can go to the website, eliteroofingga.com. That's eliteroofingga.com. Go ahead and fill out the form. Get connected with the fine folks at Elite Roofing and Restoration, and they will take care of the rest for you. Elite Roofing and Restoration. Don't settle for second best. Hey, this is Mike Morgan, and like many of you, I love staying active. It makes me feel better. It helps me enjoy a better life. But whether you're a world-class athlete or someone just keeping the dream alive like me, you'll want to make sure you have someone who can handle the injuries that are going to arise. That's where the world-renowned Dr. Michael Hatrack of Synergy Sports Wellness and Synergy Release Sports come into play. He's been my guy for nearly a decade, and he has served thousands of people, including over 400 NFL players, over a career that spans 47 years. Yeah, he's that good. And his staff's personalized biomechanical treatments and therapies can handle it all. Back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. We all know the injuries, but few know the solutions the way Dr. Hatrack and his terrifically trained staff do. I've seen others. No one delivers the results the way they do. That's why people from all over the country come to Synergy's 2 Georgia locations, Buckhead and Alpharetta. Dr. Hatrack has trained a team of chiropractors in his proprietary technique that has been proven to yield life-changing outcomes from professional athletes to the Joe Schmoes of the world like, well, me. Check out the website to set up an appointment today, synergyreleasesports.com. That's Synergy with an S, releasesports.com. You can also find a link for them on our website, jcandmorgan.com. Let the incredible staff at Synergy take care of you so you can reach your wellness goals. All right, back with you here on JC and Morgan. As always, we want to mention a couple of things. We're not huge self-promoters. You probably have realized by now. We need like our own PR department at this point in time. But to not sell us completely short, you've got the website, jcandmorgan.com, which we'll get to some of the mailbag entries from earlier in the week and even this morning. You can always email us. Just go to the website, upper right-hand tag, mailbag. We'll read your question or comment on the air, or we'll get to as many of them as we can. Also, we are now, if you're watching us, listening to us live, we do this live each and every week. We're on every major platform, not just audio with Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play, but also video. Yes, you get to see our smiling faces on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And I try to do a background, JC, of a stadium that's relevant in college football. So for the last couple of weeks, I've been sporting what? NRG Stadium in Houston. Why? Because January the 8th, that's where the national championship game will be played. This week, if you are watching right now, then you know that you'll see behind me is a stadium that you probably have never been before. I haven't. And you probably haven't seen much on TV before because they're rarely televised. But that is Memorial Stadium, War Memorial Stadium, in Laramie, Wyoming, which opened its lovely doors in September of 1950 for the cool price of $1.5 million. And just to paint the picture for those of you who are just listening to us, in the background, like a lot of schools in that part of the country, beautiful mountain landscape, open-air stadium because you don't have a ton of seats. And just an exquisite view. Now, why am I showing that? Because kudos to Wyoming, and I'm stealing a little thunder on the boss segment, but they went ahead, Wyoming did, and pulled off an upset. And I wanted to get to this quote here real quick. They pulled up an upset over Texas Tech, and 35-33 in double overtime was the score. That alone itself is a neat story that we love about college football. Again, on this podcast, we don't just focus on the same 3 things that you're going to hear regurgitated on every show. Texas Tech was a dark horse pick by a lot of people in the Big 12. Like people were very high on the Red Raiders this year. Why they went to Laramie to play a football game, I don't know, JC. Somebody scheduled it, though, and they're regretting it now. But Wyoming, have you been to Wyoming? Have you ever been to the state of Wyoming?
I have not. That's one of the few states I have not been to.
Me neither. There's I think 4 or 5 states I've never been to, and most of the states I've been to have been to broadcast a game. And I'd love to do a game in Wyoming, but it just never happened. So I don't know much about Laramie, Wyoming, other than it gets really cold in the winter. This is a quote, a tweet by Graham Coffey on Twitter, who I believe covers Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe he has some ties to Wyoming, much like our own Jamie Bradford has in-laws out there. He said, people hear Wyoming and picture I believe it's pronounced Tetons. Tetons. In reality, that's a small slice of a state that is treeless, windy, and oftentimes bleak. Only one city has more than 50,000 people. If you don't arrive there already having made your millions, it's a hard place to scratch out a life. People make their money in mining, drilling, and agriculture. Walmart is the biggest employer in the state. The second largest is the University of Wyoming. It's damn near impossible to recruit football players there, but the school brings pride to a lot of people. Spend time traveling across the whole of Wyoming, and you'll find it's a hard place not to pull for. Watching this tonight made me happy and reminded me why college football is great. They're trying to price the Wyomings out of college football. Don't forget there are people who live and die with teams like the Cowboys with just as much passion as fans of the big brands. I thought that was an awesome tweet. He doesn't cover Wyoming, so I don't know exactly where that came from. Clearly, he's been there and knows a thing or two about it. But JC, that is part of the fabric of college football that we love. It's not just the same 5 brands that are competing for the national championship every year. Every game is relevant to a group of people.
And I love that. And that's part of the reason I really hope, Mike, that the Pac-12 and Mountain West work out this reverse merger thing. Number one, because I'd like to see the money that was supposed to go to all the schools that left go to some schools that could use it, right? And number two, you do have flagship universities, that do embody the pride of an entire state in that league, Wyoming being one of them. The 2 Nevada schools go back and forth as to which one's the flagship, and they claim it's Reno, but it's really UNLV, whatever. New Mexico is, the Lobos flagship school. And I think that, I mean, heck, if Nebraska, states like that can end up having relevant football programs nationally, why can't Wyoming? I do understand it is barren, and it's not all people look and they think Jackson Hole, which I think is what he was talking about. And Jackson Hole's a very small part of the state. And Bradford's actually driven it, I think, from one corner to the other.
Wow.
Yeah, more power to him, man. But so I don't know. I that's one of the reasons I sort of hope the Pac-12 can reinvent itself with some Mountain West programs because, these states are a little barren. But, I mean, if you look up in Idaho, is what the 4th fastest growing state in America right now. People are moving.
I did not know that.
They're moving out of California in terms of course. Idaho's got a lot more natural scenery than Wyoming, but still, it's one of those things where I hope schools like this remain relevant and get a shot. And one of the ways to do that would be for the Pac-12 to remain intact and have some sort of reverse merger with the Mountain West. And I'm sure that, at least all the flagship schools like Wyoming, New Mexico, Nevada schools could move up, do whatever.
Yeah.
But hey, here's something else that's funny. Last time North Carolina beat South Carolina, you and I sat there and watched Wyoming beat Missouri. So
that's right.
If the Tar Heels are playing the Gamecocks in Charlotte and the Tar Heels win, if you're a Wyoming fan that night, you're about to get rewarded with a massive upset.
I think it's safe to say you were the only person on this planet that made that connection. Tar Heels and Wyoming enjoying similar fates a few years apart. All right, quickly around the SEC. Again, there were 3 major games. I'm not going to spend too much time on SEC teams piling up on FCS opponents. The SEC against ranked teams went 0-3, average loss by 16 points per game. I think there's a difference, though. Not all losses are built the same. At no point did I feel like LSU did not belong in the same field as Florida State. LSU has plenty of talent, and losing Mason Smith, that started to change my feel for the game. I think that's a little more important than people might believe. Mason Smith's going to be a first-round draft pick. He's a hellraiser defensive lineman, kind of in the form of a Jalen Carter a year ago at Georgia. But that being said, LSU's offense was problematic. Too many mistakes, too many miscues. They didn't score when they had opportunities in the red zone. But if you watch that game, the athletic quotient on both sides, that's what championship rosters look like. Doesn't mean they always play like championship teams, but it was a ridiculous amount of athleticism on the field in that game, by far and away more than what I saw in any other clash. But LSU is going to have to dig out of a hole again. They did it last year. They wound up beating Alabama. They wound up winning the West after losing a heartbreaker to Florida State. They're going to have to do that again. I'm not going to just jump off the bandwagon and say LSU's cooked. I don't believe that. I think it's still a really good team in Baton Rouge. We talked about the Battle of the Carolinas. It clearly, and JC, for those that don't know, owns and runs thebigspur.com, 24/7 sports. I know you were out there. I don't want to oversimplify this game, but when you can't block, it's really hard to win. And Spencer Rattler had no time to do anything and had no running game. And you had, I think the number that I saw was 16 tackles for loss by the Tar Heel defense and 1 by the Gamecock defense. That's a good way to lose a football game.
A lot of scrimmage, and even despite all that, Rattler had no turnovers, shockingly enough, because, I mean, when you're getting hit like that, you usually fumble or throw an errant pass, and completed 77% of his passes. So Rattler did his job, but the Gamecocks have some work to do, I think, on both lines of scrimmage. I think on one side of the ball, there is a talent and youth issue and an injury issue on offense. I think defensively, there's really no excuse for them playing like they did, and they need to start replacing guys if they're not going to play better.
The Leggett kid was the one standout for the Gamecocks. Like that's a star in the making right there. Juice Wells barely played. But Xavier Leggett, who's 6'3", big, physical, strong receiver. Yeah, I mean, he
runs 4.5.
Yeah, that's what an NFL wideout looks like.
He's the one that had the 100-yard kickoff return against A&M to start the game last year, and he was a high school quarterback from a small town in the PD of South Carolina, and it's just taken this long to kind of become the guy. Probably should have gotten a little more touches last year, but caught 7 against Notre Dame and a couple of touchdowns in the bowl, and then backs that up with 9 against the Heels. So a star in the making, and that's good because they can get Wells back. You have 2 really, really good wide receivers and then some complementary pieces. But they're going to have to block to win any games against their schedule this year.
Yeah, I'm going to have to figure some things out up front. It's week 1. It's overreactionary in most cases. Because you are deficient in one area in week 1 doesn't mean it can't be fixed throughout the rest of the season, or at least improved. That'll be something to look for in Columbia, with a lot of big games coming up on the schedule. And then the other one is Florida, Utah. And I will just say this, because it feels like it's forever ago since it was a Thursday night game. Florida, unlike South Carolina, unlike LSU, they lost games in different ways. Florida looked undisciplined, unprepared. The play calling was questionable, to say the least. But they had just ridiculous pre-snap penalties on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. It was as if they didn't have a fall. This is not to take away anything from Utah. I've said for years, Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underrated coaches in college football, if not the most. They've won back-to-back Pac-12 championships. But they didn't have Cam Rising. They won the game with 2 backup quarterbacks. And they won the game by doing what they do. You're not going to beat Utah on the line of scrimmage. They're going to play as close to mistake-free football continually as anybody that plays at that level. And Florida just shot themselves in they've got no toes left. And if you're Billy Napier and you're coming off 6-7 and you want to get the fan base jazzed, it's one thing, like, you don't have the talent to do this, that, and the other. Graham Mertz actually didn't play badly. That's not where the problem was in that football game. They got other issues that they got to clean up. You could look at it one of 2 ways. The good news is that's something you can clean up. You couldn't have played a worse football game. The bad news is you got a lot of games on the schedule that are going to be very difficult. And if you don't improve, it's going to be another long year in Gainesville. Just quickly around, it's the year of some first-year quarterbacks. Milroe of Alabama. We'll talk about the matchup against Texas. He looked good, but let's see what he does again against the Texas defense. That'll be in Tuscaloosa. You've got Beck at Georgia. Again, not really tested, but looked good. Thorne at Auburn. Leary at Kentucky. And I already talked about Graham Mertz at Florida. So you had a lot of new players in the quarterbacks starting in the Southeastern Conference. Early returns, I don't think we learned a lot in many of these cases. We'll learn a lot more because if you look at the SEC slate, so I mentioned the 0-3 against top 25 foes. This is another, like, if you are anti-SEC, you might be able to like hold your own personal party if things go sideways for the SEC this week. Because you got Bama, Texas. I think that'll be a competitive game. Arizona, Mississippi State, Auburn, Cal, Ole Miss, Tulane, A&M, Miami. I mean, those are formidable opponents across the board. So we're going to learn about the SEC much more. You're raising fingers. What do you got?
They could go 2-3 or 3-2, depending on what Tulane can get done against Ole Miss.
Is that so? You're predicting at least 2 losses?
Well, I mean, maybe only one, maybe 0. But Arizona Arizona and Cal, I think, are potential landmines for those two. Now, I think the Arizona game is in Starkville, though. So that because I believe they went to Tucson last year.
That's right.
But that I'd give anything in the world, Mike, and some Auburn fans.
Oh yeah.
I'd give anything in the world to be at the Auburn tailgate in Berkeley Saturday, just to see the look on their face.
Well, here's the difference. Auburn has Toomer's Corner, where when you pick up a win, you take toilet paper and you throw it at the trees, and that's part of the celebration. At Cal, that's another. I've never done a game at Cal. I've been all over California. I've never been to Berkeley specifically, but here's what I've heard from some of my brethren who have. Literally, homeless people living in trees. They're not throwing toilet paper. They're using it in the trees. So that's the difference.
I went there. I've been to Berkeley once. I stayed there in, it was about 18 years ago when I worked for Rivals. I was on one of those long trips where I just visited a lot of high schools. We stayed in Berkeley one night. The rest of Northern California at the time, and I know it's changed in San Francisco, all that beautiful. Berkeley, it looked like 1969 rolled around, and everybody's just like, all right. They shut the lights off and just stayed there. Just stayed in 1969. Like it was dirty. And compared to Stanford, the campuses aren't even close. But with what shape it is in now, and that bunch from Auburn, because they all bought too. Well, we're going out to California. We're going to go War Eagle. They're going to be out there tailgating, and I just the people watching alone would be
fascinating.
But Cal had a nice win to open the season. Justin Wilcox is a really good coach. They try. I mean, they've got this circled, and I've seen SEC teams, go out to the West Coast and really, really struggle at times. Tennessee losing to UCLA about 15 years ago, and then remember what happened to A&M when they blew a 20-something point lead. Yeah. That was the beginning of the end for Sumlin. But Auburn better look out. Ole Miss better look out. I think A&M waxes Miami. Miami is still in the bottom of the pit for me until they prove otherwise, and they haven't. They didn't prove it last week with what they did, but and I think Alabama rolls. But other than that, it is going to be an interesting week.
Yeah, I know there a lot of people are pitting this week as which are you more excited about, Bama, Texas, or Colorado, Nebraska? I mean, come on, folks.
Bama, Texas.
It's Bama, Texas.
Nebraska is going down by 4 touchdowns.
I'm not there.
The offensive coordinator matchup alone should tell you that.
Well, again, what other podcast in the country has had multiple Sean Lewis references before the game against TCU? Right here.
Right here, baby. Right here. I was at a tailgate Saturday watching that game going, I'm sure glad I've mentioned Sean Lewis 16 different times.
Yes.
This is preseason. Boy, he's good. He's good.
I've had him. I had Kent State against Oklahoma last year. I had him in another Maction game on like a Wednesday night. Dude took him to 2 bowl games. He was like he was a marginal player. He'll tell you that. But a lot of those great offensive coordinators were marginal players, but the cerebral part of it, he's got down pat, and he had next level opportunity written all over him. So to go from a head coaching job to a coordinator position, I think it just kind of flew under the radar. But people who know, people in the business knew. Like if you talk to other people in the business, they already knew the name. They knew this guy was coming. I don't know how Dion and that staff got tipped off to Sean Lewis. I don't think there's any. I think they crossed paths at any point.
He just made a hell of a hire.
But he made a hell of a hire.
I mean,
he made it. And if you watch that game, and again, I don't want to completely engage in the slurp fest that is Colorado football. Like, kudos to Colorado. Boulder's a beautiful place. I was just there a few months ago. Colorado fan base deserves something good. But what they did, if you watch the game, TCU is bigger across the board. Bigger, stronger. If this was a weight room battle, Colorado had no chance. They just played a speed game. They just played, my 11 guys are quicker. We're going to turn this into a 7-on-7 track meet, and last one standing wins, and that's what they did. Now, whether or not they do that to Nebraska, I don't know. I think Matt Rule will have a little bit more resistance, but you could be right. You could absolutely be right. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our next segment. The boss, the godfather of soul, helping bring us in the top performers of the week. We'll also dive into the mailbag as well. More JC and Morgan after a break.
Down here in the South, we don't always see eye to eye. While our taste in college football teams, or what sauce, if any...
Chicken cock originated in Kentucky, like so many other bourbons. And so the resurrection of it, Paris, Kentucky, that's the county seat of Bourbon County. So much of this whiskey was being made in that Bourbon County, put on ships and barges and shipped down to Ohio, down to Mississippi, and got to New Orleans, where it got distributed all over the world. And people kept saying, well, hey, I want some more of that whiskey from Bourbon County. And so that's how bourbon whiskey got its name. And chicken cock originated actually in Paris, Kentucky, which is today Bourbon County.
Mike here for Elite Roofing and Restoration. Chances are you're a homeowner, you're going to have that roof replaced at some point. Could be because of wind or hail damage. Could be because it's just that time. The roof is old and you don't want to take any more chances. Go ahead and call Elite Roofing and Restoration. They will take terrific care of you, as they have for me over the years. They provide exceptional roofing services. They offer a highly knowledgeable staff on insurance claims for roof repairs and replacements, as well as an extensive catalog of materials and colors to ensure your roof looks as good as it performs. So how do you do it? Well, you just start off. You can go to the website, EliteRoofingGA.com. That's EliteRoofingGA.com. Go ahead and fill out the form. Get connected with the fine folks at Elite Roofing and Restoration, and they will take care of the rest for you. Elite Roofing and Restoration. Don't settle for second best. Hey, this is Mike Morgan, and like many of you, I love staying active. It makes me feel better. It helps me enjoy a better life. But whether you're a world-class athlete or someone just keeping the dream alive like me, you'll want to make sure you have someone who can handle the injuries that are going to arise. That's where the world-renowned Dr. Michael Hatrack of Synergy Sports Wellness and Synergy Release Sports come into play. He's been my guy for nearly a decade, and he has served thousands of people, including over 400 NFL players, over a career that spans 47 years. Yeah, he's that good. And his staff's personalized biomechanical treatments and therapies can handle it all. Back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. We all know the injuries, but few know the solutions the way Dr. Hatrack and his terrifically trained staff do. I've seen others. No one delivers the results the way they do. That's why people from all over the country come to Synergy's 2 Georgia locations, Buckhead and Alpharetta. Dr. Hatrack has trained a team of chiropractors in his proprietary technique that has been proven to yield life-changing outcomes, from professional athletes to the Joe Schmoes of the world like, well, me. Check out the website to set up an appointment today, SynergyReleaseSports.com. That's Synergy with an S, ReleaseSports.com. You can also find a link for them on our website, JCandMorgan.com. Let the incredible staff at Synergy take care of you so you can reach your wellness goals. back in his dressing room. He can keep the vocal cords sharp for next Tuesday on the next installment of JC and Morgan. Quickly from the mailbag on jcandmorgan.com. Easy Ed from Jacksonville. Love the podcast, fellas. Longtime Seminole. I'll admit I was ready to fire Norvell a couple of years ago. You're not alone, Ed. Now I love the guy. Do you think the team is playoff material, and is FSU back? The jury is still out on both of those questions, but I certainly think they're going to be in the running. If they beat Clemson, I think there's an outstanding chance they're back in the playoff. And is FSU back? 1 year doesn't make you back, but I just have a feeling that they're not going anywhere anytime soon. For whatever reason, they fell into the abyss. But this is not Willie Taggart's Florida State Seminoles.
Yeah, and Norvell needed time, and I want to credit him too with not only going and getting the players in and being patient. They had some ugly losses, man. Let's just be honest, but changing the culture of that program a bit, because it's there were some guys that were talented coming out of high school on that roster that just did not. They were not good dudes. But yeah, you're right. They got Southern Miss this week at Boston College the following week, and then it's at Clemson. And then you got a bye week, and boy, Mike, I don't know who's going to beat them. Maybe, going up to Pitt, if you're a Florida school, going up north in November is always a challenge. But, unless Miami is some sort of like great team this year, they come in on November 11th. Or unless the Gators turn it around, you get through September 4-0. I think undefeated ACC championship berth, playoff. I think it's all right there for the taking in terms of Florida State should be able to do it.
Yeah.
Should be able to do it.
And they've got their, again, when you schedule a game like this and you win it, for those that want to say ACC is not this, they're not that, it doesn't matter. They already have their signature win against an SEC opponent on a neutral field, so that would get them over the hump if it came down to that, for sure. One other thing that they seem to have rectified, even going back to Jimbo, for years and years and years, even the most talented FSU teams, for whatever reason, never had an offensive line that was worth a damn. They always had a leaky offensive line. It's not as if they didn't recruit the position well. I would imagine, JC, they had their fair share of four-star guys, but they always seem to have issues on the line. I did not see an issue on the line against LSU.
Yeah. Definitely. For some reason, Mike's microphone is out. For some reason, Mike is muted. I don't know why this. Mike, you're muted, buddy. Mike, you're muted. Your microphone's muted. I don't know why. Phil, we need help from Phil. Philip. Okay, JC and Morgan podcast. Kind of an interesting situation right now. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if this is these are mine. I don't know what happened here as far as that goes. So I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on. Anyway, JC and Morgan podcast right here, just in case you can't hear Mike right now. So we will see. But yeah, I'm looking. Mike is muted at this moment. I don't know. I'm talking with Phil right now. Phil, are you hearing me or Mike? And we'll see. And we may just wrap this up. So, yeah, I'm not sure what. Okay, so it is Mike Morgan. Unfortunately, we probably just missed a lot of radio gold, but we'll go ahead and wrap it there. I apologize for everything. This is one of those technical issues that happen from time to time. I did not know. And it's kind of funny because I don't know that Mike knows this or not. Anyway, JC and Morgan, College Football Podcast. Appreciate you guys joining us. right now. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We'll get this figured out. And we'll be back probably next Tuesday, most likely. It'll take an act of God for us not to be. But for Mike Morgan, this is JC Shurburtt. This has been the JC Morgan College Football Podcast. Take care, everyone.